All right, we are live. What's up, everyone? K Ruggs, the Sober Dog here. Got a special guest, Liberty R. Russ. Russ is with us. Yeah,
Hi, everyone.
yeah. And we're gonna just tackle whatever today. We got Russ has got some notes. I got a couple things written down, but we're going with the flow. Any comments, questions too? Feel free to put them in. Russ, how you doing today? Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, all that stuff.
All right, everybody. My name's Russ. So I'm originally from York, New York, in Livingston County, um, and I moved to Rochester for 7 years, and that was like where I kind of developed like an opioid use disorder. And I moved back in 2014 because things had gotten kind of like out of control, and I wanted to kind of rein things in a little bit,
Yeah.
get some professional help. And so yeah, I'm currently living back in Livingston County. And yeah, I just recently completed a bachelor's degree.
Good for you. Congratulations. What's your degree in?
Communication.
Good for you. That's what I studied as well. That's awesome. What I know you've mentioned in the past about taking that in some avenue of addiction or recovery. Is that where you want to go with it?
Uh, that's where I've been kind of where my mind's been at lately. I actually just interviewed with an agency. I don't want to say the name of it live on
Yeah.
YouTube, but for an agency. I'm not sure if I got selected or not. I'll know by Monday if I get a call. And
Good for you. Awesome. Now, Russ, one of the things me and you always have phenomenal discussions, and you create awesome topics in all the comments of my videos. And thank you so much. From day one, you've been watching, supporting everything. I can't thank you enough. Um, is just the like the general kind of take on addiction and recovery and all that, specifically to do with, I guess, harm reduction would be the word. How would you kind of describe your view of it, or how you take that, so to speak?
um, so basically, my take on everything through my lived experience. I'm not like saying this is everybody, but
Sure.
through my lived experience is that I support harm reduction because like the problem I have with the traditional system, the traditional abstinence based model, is it's like you're either completely I guess in recovery would be the word, or you completely relapsed. I mean, I've actually seen people who had been, completely abstinent from substances for 6 months, and they have one use episode, and then whatever the treatment center will actually move them back to phase one, to what they call early recovery. And in my mind, I'm just like, that's not early recovery. There should be an intermediary. So, so I feel like it kind of puts people in a position where, even if they're out, even if they're done with treatment, like, say they smoke a joint or they have a beer or something, and like some people will automatically be like, oh my god, I got to go back to rehab. And it really frustrates me because I'm just like, no, you don't. But people, I feel like, have been trained like that's what they have to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. I just want to say real quick, Jen, what up? Good morning, Jen Cutting. Just hopped in the chat. Jen, another person too. Awesome, talking about harm reduction. Jen helps so many people, giving out clean needles, clean water, helping people. She's just incredible what she does. Um, yeah, but no, what you're saying, that is such a great point. And along those lines, I was thinking too of like somebody who's in recovery, or I say the word sober, and I guess that could have a lot of context, but they're sober for, let's say, a year, and then they relapse, or use whatever for, I don't know, a week, 2 days, 5 days. Then they come back and it's like, well, everything's gone, canceled out. And it's like, no, Like, you just spent a year rebuilding your life with a couple days of mistakes or use or whatever you want to call it. Like, that doesn't negate a year and even those days of rebuilding and going in the right track and doing these positive things. That always bothered me with the sobriety dates, because it's like, even in my own case, it was like I had 9 months sober, and then I used for 5 days. Then I had 11 months, and then I used for a week. And then since then, it's been consistent. But if I say my sobriety date at meetings and stuff, it's, it's 20, what would it be? Right under 3 years. But in reality, it's like, okay, well, out of the last 5.5 years, I've had 8 days of using, you know what I mean? So I feel like
Right.
I've been in recovery rebuilding for 5.5 years minus those 8 days. I'm not saying that's good or healthy what I did, but that's such a great point. And they send people back to phase one, like you said, and that can cripple their mindset too. People rebuilding their family and stuff. That's just did that happen to you?
It didn't really happen to me, because even when I was there, the only reason I was there, this was in 2015, just for context, the only reason I was there is because I wanted the buprenorphine. And so
Yeah.
being a human, because I was a human service major before I was a communication major when I was at MCC. So I have actually an associate's in human services. So I knew all the language and stuff they wanted to hear in the groups. And so I just sat there and said it, even though I thought the whole thing was complete BS, because I wanted the buprenorphine. And then finally I found out in the end that I would have to stay in the group indefinitely, no matter how well I was doing, to get it. And that was actually when I said, well, I'm just going to taper off. And I did it. I went through a grueling withdrawal from the buprenorphine. And
I don't want to cut you off, but how was that? Can you get into that for a second?
Well, I will, because there were two things. One, the withdrawal from the buprenorphine, which was bad enough, but I wanted to go on a Vivitrol for a month or two to make sure I'd be okay. And even though my urine test said negative, there must have still been a trace of the buprenorphine in my system, because I went into precipitated withdrawal. I'm talking about projectile vomiting and diarrhea for 36 hours at least.
Wow.
Yeah, I could not sleep. I could not keep water or food down. I couldn't leave the bathroom, nothing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was pretty bad, but again, like I think that I also didn't really like completely follow with the Suboxone taper, I didn't completely follow it because I was in such a rush to get off it that I'm just like, okay, I'm tapered.
Yeah. How long did you do your taper?
It was, I want to say, total from the time we started, like maybe a month and a half, 2 months.
Okay. So that's not, I wouldn't say necessarily a super quick one, but also not. I've heard some doctors say, like, if I taper a patient off Suboxone, I'll do 6 months, if not sometimes, like, if they're on 16, we'll do 16 for a month, then 14 for a month, then 12, all the way down. So they take it very gradual. So 2 months, yeah, it sounds kind of like in the middle of slow enough, but still pretty quick, I guess. That's
I was on 4 milligrams too, so it's not like I was because even at the height of when I was like hardcore using, like compared to like a lot of the people around me, my usage amounts were still lower as far as the quantity.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just my chemistry or maybe because I'm cheap and don't like to spend a lot of money, but but yeah, eventually when I was in the active use cycle for the opioids, it was just eventually I was like, I'm gonna buy just enough so that I'm like not sick. I'm not like trying to like get on cloud nine anymore.
Yeah, very true. And I was just looking to it. Some Jen was saying in the comments about tapers and how tricky they are, and That's what something like that always struggled with me with a taper is anytime I tried to do any self taper, my brain would go to, okay, if I'm on, 2 to 3 milligrams of Xanax a day and I want to get off it. If okay, first week I'll do my 2 or 3 or whatever. And then the next week I'm going to go down to 2. When I'm taking 2, my brain doesn't say, all right, I got 2. It says, you're missing 1. Like there was a line from Casino back in the day when he was talking about the whales gambling. And he's like, the problem with, a whale like him gambling is he can't bet 1,000 a hand. He doesn't feel like he's winning. He feels like he's losing 29,000 because he usually bets 30 a hand. That's where my brain goes. So on a taper, I find it so hard to do personally or solo without like medical supervision because my brain just says like, this is not the amount you want. You want an effect. Take more, take more, take more. Did you get that at all or feel any of those?
Well, not so much with the buprenorphine because my mind was like, I just want to leave this group because, I was there voluntarily. Like I went because I wanted help. And at the time I thought that was the proper way to get treatment. But anyway, so, but when I attempted to taper off the benzo, my diazepam, like 2 years ago now at this point, it's before COVID, I felt that, and that's why I ended up actually getting stuck on the 4 milligram dose and just staying there instead of like 5 or 10 or 15.
Okay. So 4 was kind of where you ended out at. That's where you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I landed there.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it too. And that's interesting too when you bring up the groups and how you want to, because I think, and I've seen it getting a lot better, but I remember specifically too, back when I first did a couple of outpatients and groups, this would have been between like 2010 and 2013. The rules, one failed anything, and then like they cut you off your Suboxone, your buprenorphine like that. And it's like, that's the total opposite of what you should do. Like, that's so ineffective because you cut me off that. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to run right out and buy opioids because I'm going to be in withdrawal. Maybe I'll try to find Suboxone first, and then with the group, like you talked about in the beginning of like, somebody's doing great for 4 months, 6 months, and then they smoke a joint and they get sent back to phase 1. And it's like like, how has your mindset been in these groups, or have any of those situations hit you like that, where it's just, how does that affect you and how did you deal with it?
So it affected me basically because I guess the way I dealt with it was I long story short, I left the group, got off the Suboxone, eventually got off the Vivitrol, and then I just used Kratom for a few years. But we'll get to that point in a minute. So while I was in the group, it affected me because there would also be situations like where they would tell someone like publicly in front of everybody, like, oh, you had a positive urine screen. And then like an hour later after the group had left, they'd be like, oops, I was looking at the wrong file. Sorry. And I'm just thinking that's an unacceptable mistake. Like, yeah, like that. And I'm also just against the whole idea of sitting in front of a group of strangers because, even though most groups have people sign something saying that they won't bring stuff outside the group, like there's no recourse like there would be if a doctor or a therapist disclosed your personal information. You know what I mean?
Yeah, interesting. I don't necessarily agree with that second point there. I totally understand your concern about it. I just wouldn't know another way around it. I've had better luck personally talking to complete strangers who understand what's going on because they're in it themselves than like friends and family who are my biggest support but just don't get it because they're not in it. But that, I totally get your concern about that and where that would be. And yeah, that is an unacceptable mistake. Like if there's even a potential anything, first of all, the reason that's a huge unacceptable mistake is like, you shouldn't have to read that off in front of the class, period.
Right.
Like do that one-on-one. So then if there is a mistake, oh, boom, I just told you, and then I corrected it to you an hour later, and nobody else hears it, period. Like that is incredibly unacceptable. That everyone's going to walk out of there. I don't know why this came to my mind, but I remember a person was like on the ground, shaking around, and everyone was like, they're overdosing, get the Narcan. And the person was, no, I'm not. Like, they were awake, good enough to go. They got stung by a bee, and they were telling everyone to get their EpiPen. But still, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, the rumors going around was that he overdosed in the parking lot. And it was like, there was a dozen people who watched him awake like this, swelling up. The EpiPen, he clears right up when he gets the pen. But yet the perception and the rumors, persisted. And I'm using that example because I could see like being in a group where, oh, Russ, you failed this week for opioids, 10 people here. Even if the counselor corrects it the next week, everyone's got it in their mind. Oh, Russ just failed last week. Russ did this last week, blah, blah, blah. That could be very detrimental.
It's just like a news article where they write something and then they write a redaction later. People only remember the original headline.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great. I don't want to get deep into any of the politics stuff, but a certain CEO for a major news company, I remember last year, he said, we would rather put something out, even if it's incorrect first, but be the first to do it, because all we got to do to cover ourselves from liability the next day is put a retraction on our website. And he goes, the best part is the original story gets 1 million views. The retraction will get 30,000 views, and we get paid on both.
Wow.
And I was just like disgusted, like, you're the major news, okay, but whatever. That's how our brains work. If you did, I don't know if you wanted to or not, but you said it yourself. Did you want to dig into the kratom at all? I don't have any experience with it, but I've heard everything back, forth, good, bad, middle. Fill me in. What was your experience?
Yeah, so my experience, and like I'm not giving medical advice, like obviously people should always talk to a medical provider first. I used it and it worked for a few years. Like it had mild opioid effects, almost like it was just sort of tickling the receptors, but it doesn't last more than a few hours, so it ends up to the point where you're still spending like $60 to $70 to $80 a week.
Yeah.
So when I found out about low threshold buprenorphine prescribing, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have to go to a group and I can test positive for cannabis. Like I was like, I called my doctor because he's a buprenorphine doctor, and I'm like, hey, can I do this and get off the kratom? Because the kratom still has withdrawals. Like like it may not be as severe as like heroin or fentanyl, but it's a lesser version of that, with the runny nose and the pain in your legs and irregular bowel movements, I guess you could say.
Okay. How long do you think that withdrawal lasted compared to like opioids?
I've tried to do it before without the buprenorphine, and to get through the noticeable parts, about 3 or 4 days, but then the mental craving to go back and get more kratom, it didn't go away. And so long story short is like the only way I got off it, I just went back on the buprenorphine.
Okay.
Now that it's low threshold and I don't have to do all these other things.
Can you explain that a little bit to people who may not know what that means, the low threshold buprenorphine prescribing?
Yes. So low threshold buprenorphine prescribing, it's something that New York recently implemented, and I know there's a push to do it on a national level in some circles, but basically, traditionally, like how I talked about earlier, you would have to go to a group to get the buprenorphine, and if you failed a drug test, they would kick you off the medicine, maybe your first time, definitely your second time. And there were just all these rules attached to it. Low threshold is basically like, even if you're still using other drugs, like not just weed, but even if you were somebody who's testing positive for cocaine or other prescriptions or something, they would still give you the prescription. I mean, they might only, in that situation, they might have you come on a weekly basis instead of a monthly basis, but they're not gonna leave you high and dry. They're gonna send you home with the prescription, because the thinking is, let's at least cover the opioid part of the substance use problem, because that's the one that's more likely to kill them. Because some
Sure.
some batches of cocaine could have fentanyl in it, but pretty much every batch of heroin these days, and most of the pills, the counterfeit pills on the street, all have fentanyl in them. So it's like, that is, probably the more dangerous one, if you're going to rank it in order of what you should be worried about your patient maybe being on.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't know much about that. Now, so my only problem with that necessarily would be, I'm a fan of. I totally agree with you about all the rules and stipulations attached to. And for anyone that may not know, when we keep mentioning buprenorphine, for the generic or more societal use of that is Suboxone, which a lot of people know. That's typically what it's referring to. But the rules and everything attached to that, I totally understand, can be an absolute pain. And that is the exact reason I went to a private addiction doctor when I first got released, instead of the group I was at, which I had to go to for parole. But to actually get the medication, I went to a private doctor because there was just so much BS attached to taking it at group, along with the fact that I went in there and I was like, I'm losing my mind with heroin cravings. I'm a week out of prison. I'm going to use. And they're like, oh, great, we'll get you on the list. This was roughly August, like 16th, 2017. And they're like, we'll get you on the list. We can get you in October 7th or October 8th. And I'm like, that's 8 weeks away, like 6, 7, 8 weeks away. I'm like, I need help quicker. But that aside, the group in the some type of recovery program, I'm a fan of. I I guess I could see both sides of it, where people have things to do, they're rebuilding, they have a life, they have kids, they have everything. But to me, it helped a lot, and I see it with a lot of people, helping to actually, instead of, okay, we're just going to give you the medication and um, it's going to help hopefully balance out from you using your opioids or whatever, is we're going to give you the med along with, we would recommend and want you to come to treatment a couple times a week for this amount of time. That to me helped a lot for a couple reasons. It was just like, it kind of put recovery in the front of my mind a couple of weeks. It held me accountable to actually go and do it. With that being said, yeah, I totally agree with, like, if somebody fails a test their sixth or seventh week, they shouldn't get kicked out. They shouldn't be sent back. It should be, let's keep progressing and build and do the right thing and not just punish them. How would you feel? How do you feel about that? Do you think some type of program should be kind of mandated, or what do you
I
think?
I think that you would have been able to get a spot in that group that you were trying to get into right away if they hadn't been, funneling people like me in there who are like just there to get the buprenorphine and aren't really interested in full abstinence from everything. Like there's a lot of people, that don't want, most of it's criminal justice related, but I'm sure there's a few like me. So I think it would actually free up space to get the people in who would prefer to do an abstinence based approach. If and it's not like the doctors won't, like, mention the option of going to treatment to people who are like more on the high risk side of the spectrum. I mean,
Sure.
I'm sure my doctor mentions it, but there's also like people like me that just really want to just wake up, take the medicine, and just go on with the rest of my life. I don't I don't look at myself as practicing recovery. I look at myself as practicing harm reduction. Because what was it? Where is it on here? It's oh yeah, basically because yeah, like I don't like the word addict, and they use the word addict a lot. It's a word that if you say to someone like I'm an addict, it's a word that will automatically cause society to treat you differently. Whereas I've tested this out. I do this all the time. If I say um I'm on medication for opioid use disorder, it catches people off guard. Even people who want to say something mean, they're like, "Oh my God, I don't want to say something mean to somebody with a medical condition." And so
Interesting.
I actually do it just to screw with people sometimes.
Wow.
But
Yeah. What are the different reactions you get?
well, I mean, it like I said, it catches people off guard, and they're like, buprenorphine, and then I'm like, oh, Suboxone, and then they're like, oh, isn't that like government heroin? And I'm like, no, it's like basically I try to explain like the ceiling effect and the partial agonist antagonist as in common terms as much as possible to so that people understand what it is.
Sure. That's a very interesting point. That's tough. As a person who does 12-step, um, daily, and it has saved my life. It's incredibly hard for me sometimes to look at the other side of it, because I do go to a place daily where I say, I'm an addict or alcoholic, where they kind of use that path. But I could absolutely see your side where you're saying that 1,000%, because yeah, once you tell somebody those words, it's like there is a totally different view. I think that's what's hard too with people that are maybe on the fence of their use or their drinking or whatever, because it's like the second you come out and admit to family, friends, whoever, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict, I'm drinking too much. Like that barrier gets put up of like now, anytime if anybody sees you in the future with a glass of wine, with a joint, with whatever, it's like, oh my God, they're off the wagon. They relapse, they're screwed.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say in my next thing is like, there actually just are certain things that I do that aren't really problematic, as far as like is, not interfering with what I want to accomplish and who I want to be, and not interfering financially. So that's like the next thing too, is especially with the glass of wine or something, is like, I don't drink very often because I know it's not a good idea. I do have, addictive personality, but at the same time, like there'll be a few times a year where I will drink, and my harm reduction is I plan ahead and I say I'm going to need a 24-hour day after to recover from the hangover, because I'm very sensitive to the hangover now since I don't drink very often. And also I don't beat myself up over it and say, oh, I relapsed. I just say, okay, I wanted to drink, I drank, and then I move on. And as long as it doesn't become a pattern, like I don't beat myself up over it. And I think because of that, it kind of makes me immune to that, like that psychological I've got to go back to rehab type of thing that we talked about.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, so the how it's kind of been explained to me then through that, like the 12-step method, is maybe you wouldn't have classified, and again, these are going to go back to the labels we just talked about not being good, but as an addict or alcoholic, because like I could only speak for myself. If I drink, any plans I have prior, even though alcohol was never my drug of choice, um, is out the window. And I have unfortunately tested this in the past. I could have the best game plan, like you said, map it out. I'm only going to do it tonight, blah, blah, blah. And tomorrow I'm off. And then like 2 to 3 beers in, all these bad ideas become a little bit better and better and better. Next thing you know, I got an 8-ball and I'm off to the races. So like in that sense, I know I can't do that at all. So I guess you answered it earlier. You don't classify yourself as that, an addict or alcoholic. So let me say, for the general people in some type of recovery program and or in some type of active use, do you think they can manage something like that healthy? Because I guess what I'm saying, long story short, is in my experience, no. Most people I have seen that have tried to do I could just drink once in a while, it doesn't work for them because they end up going back to use or substituting with that and doing it on extreme levels.
So that's the $1 million question, because in order to actually, in order to answer that on a real scientific level, we would have to first we would have to have a control group where we remove the stuff that they learn in abstinence-based rehab and 12 steps type of stuff, and try just use putting those people through a medicalized model, and giving them no exposure to the other thing, and then seeing how many after a year or two go back to that pattern. Because I believe some of it, like I said, is learned, but I also believe that there really are people who, if they do anything, they're screwed. Like, whether it's alcohol, whether it's weed, there absolutely are people like that, and that needs to be taken into consideration too. But I think a lot of it is there's a copycat syndrome where somebody is like, they drink and they're like, well, my counselor says I have to fall off and start doing all this other stuff. That's what must happen. And so, or some people say, well, I already relapsed anyway, I may as well do the other substance or what, and so to answer that, there would really have to be a way to see how people respond if they've been treated completely with the medical model their entire life, after saying that they wanted to get help.
Sure. That's a great point too. Like the fuck it's, because that's such a psychological thing of, I just had 2 beers. Maybe the part of my brain can say, okay, you could have 2 more and go home. But then there's the other part, like, you already relapsed, fuck it, and just go out. You're going to do what you're going to do anyway. You got to go back tomorrow and get your 24-hour coin, or so to speak. So you might as well go out with a bang.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very unique point. I didn't think about it like that. Yeah, it just it's definitely something. You said it perfect. $1 million question. What so we've been running for about 33 good minutes here. What else did you have on your list that you wanted to talk about? Because I know you got some phenomenal points and questions and answers and all the comments of the videos. Every comment Russ has, I'm like, here we go. I got to think. I gotta look at this, and it's great. That's incredible.
Yeah, because I try to look at stuff through nuance, because sure. I think that this is a lot more nuanced than people make it out to be. So one of the things I think I want to talk about really quick is refill anxiety. I every month, even before I was on the buprenorphine, just for my diazepam, my Valium, the day of the appointment, I would get anxious, worried, even though I had my medicine for the day. I would go into fight or flight. Like, what if it's out of stock at the pharmacy? Oh my God, it's an electronic prescription. This would be a nightmare to try to resend somewhere else.
Russ, real quick, try not to click your pen so much.
Sorry.
It's all right. You could hear it pretty loud.
I'm making myself nervous anyway.
You're all good. You're all good, brother.
So so like the what if something happens at the pharmacy and it's out of stock, or what if my doctor forgets to press the button and send it in, because that actually happened once. And just, I mean, luckily when I call my doctor, it goes right to his cell phone. Like
Sure.
he has, so I have that. I don't have to go through a receptionist, but still, like, I don't know. And then with the buprenorphine, it's even worse, because like I got a letter that said that starting in October, Medicaid is going to force me back on the brand name Suboxone instead of the generic that I've been getting.
Yes, I saw that. I heard about that.
And so my doctor last month wanted to send in the brand name dispenses written just to see what would happen. And the pharmacy was like, we don't have that in stock. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm trying to get a hold of him. I'm already on the way to the pharmacy. And luckily they were able to get a hold of him by phone and switch it back. But yeah, refill day for me is extremely, extremely nerve wracking because of all the red tape with controlled substances.
So before I jump into that, on a side note, why would it necessarily be of concern if you got the brand name versus a generic? Cost?
Well, I mean, it will cost me a couple dollars more, but not really cost, because we're talking about a difference from $1 to $3. So it's not really cost. It's more, I'm worried about the fact that like, for example, the pharmacy said they didn't have it in stock last time. So what am I gonna do come October? Because I can't wait 1 or 2, 3 days for it to show up. Like,
I see what you're saying. Interesting.
So I think since my doctor scheduled the appointment 28 days out this time, even though he gave me 30 days worth, I'm gonna see maybe if instead of like what he normally does after counting it, where he says, okay, we're gonna schedule it where you use up the leftover, I'm gonna see if maybe he can schedule it where I'll have the leftover when the official change happens, in case that happens.
That is such a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up too. That I could relate to that so much. That goes back to what I was saying about that gap too, when I first went to the group and had the private doctor, and because of having the ability with good support to be able to call a private doctor and pay out of pocket, she was able to send in a prescription right away. But that's very true. There's so many times, the pharmacy, the 2 days here, 3 days here, we got to ship it in. The doctor, it got to the message machine at 9:15. They close at 9. It doesn't get looked at till 9 the next morning. And that to play devil's advocate, on the flip side of that, because of everything going on in the past 20 years, they've become a lot more strict with controlled. So I wonder what would be a good middle ground for that, of not giving people extra meds necessarily, but breaching you could fill your prescription 5 days early, so to speak, to have 5 days of like double, or not taking double, but you know what I mean? So like every month you're a couple days early. So even if there's a 2 or 3 day gap, okay, I'm still only on day 27 of 30 yet. So maybe something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I mean to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Wegmans like allows a couple early refills, but it's not clear what time cycle or how many they allow. They'll just, like, if for example, if you call and check on something, they'll be like, well, we can fill it, but it would be early. It would be your last early refill. And I'm like, I didn't even know I had early refills. Yeah. Because one time they did it without me even asking, and I'm like, I would have saved that for an emergency if I. But yeah, what could be done? I think that they should really change the federal law to just allow a refill, like an automatic refill on controlled substances, like for most of them. Maybe not Schedule 2s, but like buprenorphine, diazepam. Trying to think of some other ones like sleep medicine, stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting. I'm not sure. That's, I guess, who knows? And we, have to look at all the sides of it, of how many people, and that would almost be impossible to tell, but like who's abusing it, who's actually taking advantage of it, or versus genuinely needing it early, or just like you said, without having that 2 to 3 days every month of like incredible anxiety and pressure of I'm busting my ass to rebuild life. And if the pharmacy's not prepared today, I might have to show up to work in withdrawal today, not of my own drug use or anything, of just the system not working on the day it should. And then it's like, what does that mentally do for the next couple days? And then that could send somebody out on a spiral of like, the system's out to get me. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm busting my ass every day. And now I'm getting screwed, so to speak.
Yeah, and the fact that I spent so much time studying this system to figure out how to navigate it, I think that's probably why I get even more anxious than the average person, is because I know how restrictive it is. And I like when something comes up or something, I already know why it's coming up. And I almost wish I didn't dig into the information now that I know.
So man. Yeah. It's like the more you got, the more knowledge, but now you know what's going on. And so you can sit there and like, see, the son of a bitch, this is going on and that's happening and this is behind the scenes. Oh man. The thing with the Suboxone too, I've heard that from a couple other people. I think that has to do with the lawsuit too, as well. Right. That when it was about a year ago, they got the settlement. I actually got a settlement from that too, because they were overcharging and not giving us the option of generic brand buprenorphine from 2013 to 2017, give or take. Right. And so now I think it has to be available at cost of generic regular Suboxone, correct? I don't know if you know this or not. I got to dig into it a little bit more too. I think that's the point of that paper that went out.
I didn't think of it like that. I was aware of the lawsuit. I know that the CEO of Indivior spent 6 months in prison for saying that, because in 2010, when the patent was expiring on the pill, they said, well, we got to keep the patent. We made a film because it's more childproof. And they used a study which not only was exaggerated, but the study was completely made up. And the FDA doesn't like being hustled that badly.
I didn't know that. Wow. I got to dig into that more. I didn't know he did prison time either.
Yeah, 6 months.
But that makes total sense. I mean, what some of these pharmaceutical companies do is just, it's insane. I saw something the other day too on a documentary that they were talking about, like, there could be a med that the health implications are incredible, but because it's not going to affect a large enough section of society, that they'll totally scrap it for a quote blockbuster drug that's not ineffective, but as long as it's not as effective, or maybe not for something that's even half as serious. If it's going to, I think the threshold was, I could be totally off on this, the number of billion a year in revenues is sticking in my head, but that sounds like a lot. It may not be with pharmaceuticals. They look for drugs just above that. And if it's under that, it's basically like sent to level 3, and they're like, we'll deal with it whenever we could deal with it. And that's so sad. Like, you could have the cure for cancer. I mean, granted, I'm sure that if they had a pill that could cure cancer, it would create a ton of money. But if it wasn't going to create money, they'll just scrap it, even though it'll help a ton of people, because this one for, acid reflux could create a ton of money, even though it might not necessarily be like something that everyone needs daily, or something that's going to save lives, I guess. Just an uncomfortable thing.
It's sad.
Yeah.
And then I think the final thing, because I know we're getting close on time. I think the final thing is I wanted to discuss unhealthy relationship with drugs, versus healthy. And I guess I can combine that with addiction versus dependence. But so really quick, do we have time really?
Go ahead, sure.
Okay. So basically, with unhealthy versus healthy, I know that, like, a lot of people are taught, and again, don't listen to me, don't take advice from me, for everybody out there, but I know a lot of people are taught, like, oh, well, if you have a problem with this substance, you'll have a problem with everything. I've just, I've learned over the years that's not true. I mean,
Yeah.
typically now, the only other thing I do besides my medications is cannabis. But I mean, over the past 4 years, I've done a couple different substances, like MDMA, psychedelics, stuff like that. Um, I didn't like find it to be super crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I also don't do it all the time because it's just not the type of thing you would do all the time. Um,
Yeah.
So it's that, and then addiction versus dependence. Like, somebody could look at me and say you're addicted to the Valium, but it's dependence, because like addiction would be like if you used up the whole bottle 2 weeks early and then we're out on the street looking for more. The
Yeah.
dependence is like I need to take the same amount every day, but it's, I don't know, I wish more people understood the difference, because even with the painkillers and stuff that people were legitimately prescribed, I mean, I see legitimate pain patients who were not doing anything wrong, who have been just completely thrown to the wolves because of people like me that never had a prescription, that were just, taking them for fun, like to get, to get high off of. It's really, it's sad that we can't find a middle ground between complete overprescribing and complete non-prescribing.
Yeah. That's a great point. That's it's funny you bring that up too. I'm banned on TikTok right now
Wow.
because um, I said something about opioids for long-term pain use, and I definitely apologize and admit my mistake. I still stand by my statement, but I said vast majority, and I definitely should not have said that. And there's a lot of people who are pain advocates on there, so to speak, who take medicine for whatever reason. And I said right in the thing, I'm sorry for the people that are in pain and that need meds. And I'm not saying you don't need, and I've never said people don't need opioids. I made generic statements saying I think we overprescribed them in the past, to some extent still do. At 13, I got 60 days of Vicodin for my wisdom teeth taken out.
Right.
Not necessary. Both of my parents have gotten opioids for minor operations. Both of them have told the doctor, I took it for 2 days. I didn't like the feeling. I don't want it. Yet they get a refill.
Wow.
These are like things like that was what I was going with that. And these people went nuts against me. Like, and I was like, also too, I legitimately was prescribed them for pain. I firmly believe that I believe that the addiction tendencies, genetic or whatnot, were there prior. I was using a lot of stuff way before that. But, I went to my doctor too after that fifth concussion in football with neck pain. And we started at the 5 milligram Percocet and worked up, and it was a legit prescription. But never said they didn't need it. There's a lot of people who need it. They are thrown to the wolves. Absolutely. My point was, I don't think it should be the first line of defense. I think we should look at and also get to the core, not just you're in pain, here's pills, bye. What is causing it? Is there stuff we could do? Sure, if we need to give you painkillers to manage the pain, of course. But let's also see what other avenues are going on. Is there long-term physical therapy we could try? You do the opioids for a year. As you're doing that, let's see if it gets better. And that by no means is saying also if it doesn't, we cut you off. Of course not. Just these look at different things instead of here's the pills because you're in pain and I'm a doctor and the internet's out there. And if I don't give you your pills, you're going to send an email to the FDA and the CDC and the American Medical Association saying I didn't treat you. Or in the early 2000s when they had ratemydoctor.com,
Yeah.
It's like people would go in there, doc, I'm in pain. I need Percocet. Okay, well, let's try this, this, and this. And if that doesn't work, I'll write you a prescription next month. And they go on that. This doctor doesn't treat pain, and they lose their mind on them.
I mean, I
Go ahead.
personally, sorry, I personally, not with the opioids, but it's trickled down to other controlled substances. I personally, for 4 years, even with this doctor that I trust, although to be fair, when I started, he had just met me, sort of. But for 4 years, I was unable to get a benzodiazepine prescription. I mean, I think I was actually on too much back before, because before 2016, I was on zero point 0.5 milligrams of Klonopin 3 times a day, which I actually looked up is quite a lot if you compared it to the Valium I'm on now. And he didn't want to keep giving it to me because I was using cannabis, and so he tapered me off, and I got off, but I had like long time anxiety afterwards, and he tried SSRIs, didn't really work. Tried pregabalin, Lyrica, caused all types of side effects. And in 2019, when I was back in college, he would give me like a week of Valium here or there. But finally, I just wrote him a letter and just said, like, look, I'm going to get these one way or the other. I am basically going to go buy them on the street. There's all these pressed counterfeit pills on the street. Like, I'm not asking you for an insane amount. I just want a low dose of Valium to treat this. I basically, I understand the risk of the dependence. I'm willing to accept that to get rid of what's going on. Nothing else has worked. And finally, after a few years, when I wrote that letter, he looked at it and agreed to do it. But I mean, if I hadn't have been studying what my doctor is afraid of for the past couple of years, I would have never figured out how to do that. He was, afraid that I was going to become dependent and then say my doctor turned me into a drug addict.
Sure. Yeah. That line right there is a huge thing, because I'm sure exactly there somebody who genuinely needs X, Y, or Z med, and the doctor doesn't want to give it because of society now and other doctors going to jail, which some absolutely deserve to. And then others, it's kind of he said, she said, unfortunately, in some of the cases. But that's a very good point. I just wonder if people are putting in the background work like you are to get knowledge of that situation. And I guess I'm biased too, because so much of my experience with the doctors and prescription world has been around people abusing it, being with people in addiction and recovery and whatever so often that a lot of their stories, even active or in the past, has been, went to this doctor, then doctor shop, then done this, or upped my meds so I could sell it. So I'm sure there's some biases in my brain about it, which is what even more important to have discussions like this, because then it to look at it objectively, you spent 4 years trying to get a med that you researched and know you needed and was going to help. And what's going to happen during that time too, for somebody who can't wait 4 years, not that you could, you know what I mean? Like, that anxiety or depression can spiral out of control so quick. And that's crazy.
And it's also really sad too, because whether it's consciously or subconsciously, I believe that doctors judge people based on their socioeconomic education level. Because it was like when I went back to college at Geneseo in fall of 2018, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I know you struggle with anxiety. If you ever have any trouble with that and need some help, feel free to call me. And that was where like the one, I'm not saying my doctor is a bad doctor, but I'm saying that I think that everybody who's a doctor has some biases like that. I think even if somebody did type a letter, if it's perfectly articulate, if somebody comes in, in their factory clothes or something, I feel like that person gets looked at very differently than, oh, I'm a communication major working on a bachelor's, and it shouldn't be that way.
Sure. Absolutely true. Yeah. and maybe with the quote factory worker, and this again is by no means nothing against them, just may not have the resources or don't know the pathways to do some of the research that the other person may have done. And then that gives them even kind of a lower platform, because the doctor, like you said, may already be judging them, and they also might not have the medical knowledge or have done it. So then it's like, no, the doctor tells them, this is it, you do this, and that's it, bye. Like jump to conclusions almost of they don't know any better. And that's terrible.
It is. And what I want to say to everybody out there before we end this is like, doctors, particularly for controlled substances, they want documentation. Documentation is key, especially now. And so by writing letters, and then even after you get the prescription, continuing to write monthly or maybe every other month after a certain point, updates, that's something they can put in your file. So if some 3-letter agency ever accuses them of doing something wrong, they can say, like, here's all the documentation. My patient has objectively gotten better. They've graduated college. They found a good job, or they're trying to find a good job. Their blood pressure's down, down to a normal level. Like all these things, that doctors can document. And a lot of people don't understand this, and they rightfully get upset when they leave the office, but they don't know how to fix it. So writing, a 1 or a 2-page letter to your doctor, about why you think the medicine will work, but also, follow-up letters like that you can never have too many documentations.
That's a phenomenal. I never would have thought about that. That's such a great point. Wow. I never would have thought about that. It makes so much sense. It's so true. Russ, thank you so much. You got a ton of knowledge, and you've been supporting and all Sober Dogs for years. Anything else you want to say in conclusion here?
Basically just everybody, like I know I talk a lot, like how I don't like abstinence-based rehab, but if it really helps you, like do it, whatever helps you live the best quality of life. But I just want people out there who are more like on my side of the spectrum, somewhere in the middle between completely off the rails and completely, I guess you could use the word sober. That like there is a space for if you have the right chemistry to live a healthy, productive, fun life. It's just you got to be able to self-monitor. You got to be able to look at something and say, is this really, is this MDMA really for a rock concert? Is this drink really for a graduation party, or am I doing it every week now? And if you can honestly self-monitor, like, I don't know, just whatever works best for you, like medication assisted therapy, like groups, like what's the internet one called? Smart Recovery.
Smart Recovery, yeah.
Yeah, or just watching YouTube videos if that's therapeutic, like whatever works best. I want people to be able to be the best versions of themselves.
So true. So it sounds like a lot of self accountability in there too. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I am with virtually, as far as like the substance stuff, I have to be, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to accurately tell whether something's problematic or not.
Interesting. That's so true. That's why I always say everyone's got a different path to their recovery, and whatever their recovery looks like, or some people don't even want to classify it as that, just their progress, or like you said, living their best life, whatever that means. Great. Good for you. Find it. Awesome. That's incredible. Russ, thank you so much. We'll definitely have to do this again. I already know Hugo, a couple people in the comments have certain topics and stuff they want to talk about. So I know Hugo said he's going to send it to me on email. We'll get it for next time. Thank you, everybody. Aaron, Carla, Jen, Ava, you guys are awesome. Victor, stay strong, man. Day 4. Good for you. That's incredible. Bob, so many people. That's freaking awesome. And we'll write down some of these topics and get it going for next time too.
Thanks, Kyle. Thank you for having me on.
Of course, brother. Russ, and we're right in the same town too, so we'll have to get up and have lunch sometime, man.
Yeah, I'm only 45 minutes away, so I can easily. I come to Rochester at least once a month. I try to anyway.
Nice. Yeah, that's not bad at all. Thank you so much, man. Have a great Sunday, and we'll be in touch shortly.
Yes, sir. See you later.
All right, buddy.
Peace.